Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode Iron Man. Last time we did chapter 11 and almost died, and it probably wasn't a very good showing of my Fire Emblem skills, and I doubt that chapter 12 will be any different, because chapter 12 is actually pretty hard. Um, we'll get into why. Let's see, restart here. Hector leaves Ostia, blah blah blah. Again, we'll be skipping the cutscenes. And here's the chapter. It's a bit different in Hector mode than it is in Eliwood mode. A lot more Pegasus Knights. This is actually pretty common in pretty much every Hector chapter. There's a lot of Pegasus Knights. Which is good for Hector because he uses axes. Not so good for Eliwood because he uses swords. So you get a lot of new units in this chapter, and because of that, I thought something that I could do is split up the episodes. So in this one, I think I'll only be talking about the units and about the chapter, and then maybe in the next one, I will actually play it. This is just because there's so many new units that you get here, and I don't want to make the episode too long. So let's talk about the new units you get. Here's Hector and Matthew. Full health this time. Thankfully not dead. And we get two new people from Hector's squad here. We get Oswin. Oswin is actually kind of like a mini Jagan in a way. He joins at a really high level for the join time. He's level 9. I think the other highest level was like... We have level 2 Lowen here. Yeah, there you go. Level 2 Lowen. Good job, dude. So Oswin is pretty high level. So he's good early, especially because he can tank a lot of these guys. I actually think that he's better in Iron Man runs than other runs because in Iron Man runs you play a lot more slowly than in normal runs. So whereas his low movement would be a detriment in normal runs, I actually think that it doesn't matter as much in an Iron Man run. So I think he's really good. He's a good option for Iron Man runs, but I don't think I'll be using him just because I want to use Sane or Kent instead. And they also use a Knight's Crest, and I'd rather promote them first, and I don't want Oswin just kind of sitting there. So for that reason, I'm not going to be using Oswin. I will be using him, obviously, for now, because I kind of need to use him if I don't want to lose. And then we have Sarah here. Sarah and Matthew aren't normally in this chapter if you play it on Eliwood mode. They're only here on Hector mode. And before I talk about Sarah's stats, I actually want to mention that. These two units being here might seem like it makes the chapter a bit easier, just because you have 2 extra units, right? But it actually makes it harder, and it's like deceptive difficulty, and that's a very common thing in Hector mode, deceptive difficulty. A lot of the times the game will make you think like it's giving you something as a positive, but it's actually making it harder for you. And I think that's a very good way of adding difficulty to a game. So Matthew and Sarah won't actually be able to do much here because there's like a single or 2 axe guys here, but there's a bunch of Pegasus Knights that will melt them. And Sarah doesn't actually need to heal Oswin or Hector because they aren't in any real danger of dying unless you like put them in like all the wrong places. So the only thing Matthew and Sarah can do here is not die. So it's a pretty cool way of adding difficulty, I think. Although it's kind of annoying to play as. Anyway, back to Sarah. I personally really don't like Sarah. I don't like her personality, and I think Priscilla is a better healer than her. If you bother training her up, she becomes a pretty good bishop. However, I plan on using Lucius, and Lucius is already a pretty good bishop. So I don't really see any point in me using Sarah. That being said, I will be using her until I get Priscilla because I need heals and I need to live. So Sarah will be my go-to healer for a solid 3 this chapter, the next chapter. So 2.5 chapters until I get Priscilla. And then we go down to Eliwood's big squad. Normally he plays these guys in Eliwood mode, and then these guys come, but In Hector mode, you play as these guys, and then Eliwood's guys come. So you have Eliwood himself, and the legend, except not really. His growths are like balanced, but they're too balanced. So he doesn't actually, or he isn't actually good in any one thing. He's not bad at any one thing, but he's not good at any one thing, and that's a bad thing in Fire Emblem. He's also sword locked until his promotion, and swords are the worst melee weapon in Fire Emblem, just because there's no 1-2 version of them, unlike hand axes and javelins. Upon promotion, Eliwood becomes decent because he's mounted and he gets access to lances, but why wouldn't you just run a paladin? That being said, I don't know what it is, but for some reason my Eliwoods always get super Papa blessed, so I think I might use him for now. If he starts getting like super good growths, I'll keep using him. If not, I might drop him. That's one thing about lords. They are force deployed on some chapters, so a lot of people think that that means you have to use the lords. You don't. There's a lot of chapters that your main lord won't have to be force deployed. I'm sorry, your non-main lord won't have to be force deployed. And Eliwood isn't the main lord for this, Hector is. So I won't have to deploy Eliwood, and if I do deploy Eliwood, I don't have to use Eliwood. I will still try to use Eliwood for now, though, just because he's decent against these axe units. Then we have Eliwood's guardsmen. I have no idea how these guys got hired as guardsmen. We have Bartray and Dorcas. They're the two goon axe fighters of this game. If you don't know, in Fire Emblem games, there's always like two goon axe fighters that join. We have Bartray here. Bartray's a bad character, unfortunately. He's got pretty meh growths, and it's pretty likely that he'll get either speed or accuracy screwed. So he might not be able to double, or all of his hits might miss. He has a decent strength growth, but that won't matter if you can't hit or you can't double. I've used him more times than I am proud of, just because I use Carla for a lot of my themed runs, because she fits a lot of themes. And in order to get Carla, I have to use Bartray. It's kind of unfortunate. Luckily, this time, I won't use Carla, so I won't use Bartray. Then we have the other goon here, Dorcas. Dorcas is a little bit better than Bartray. Bases, he has worse growths, but bases are better than growths, because a growth relies on RNG. A base is there, and you can use it right away. I'm using Dorcas in my current run, using bad units, and he actually got really blessed. It's probably not worth using him if you're trying to have an efficient run, but he's actually pretty fun to use if you're just memeing around. Unfortunately, I'm not memeing around. I'm trying to not die, so I won't be using Dorcas either. Sorry, bud. Then we have this other guardsman here, Lowen. Lowen is one of the 3 Cavaliers, unpromoted Cavaliers that you get in this game. You get him along with Sane and Kent. There are some people that will say Lowen is the best of the 3, but there's people that will say anyone is the best of the 3. In my opinion, Lowen is the worst of 3. Sane and Kent, in my opinion, have better growths. They all have similar growths, but each one kind of values a certain stat or two over the others, where it has like very slightly higher. In my opinion, Lowen doesn't have the proper stats. Sane has strength and defense that he values, and I think that's a lot better than whatever other stats the units could value. I've actually played a run where I used all 3 of the Cavaliers, as well as 2 Paladins, and in my opinion, Lowen was the worst character of that run. He was worse than Isadora, who, in my opinion, actually isn't that bad, but we'll get to her once we get to her. So I won't be using Lowen, just because Sane is better. The one thing to mention is that Lowen does actually join a bit earlier than Sane and Kent, And in my mounted run, I actually fed low in a lot of kills before I got to Satan Kent, so he was stronger than them earlier. But levels on him, they quickly became better. So he might be worth using if you want something that can give you a little bit of power early, but he'll fall off late, and it'll kind of feel like you wasted that power. So next we have Rebecca. Oh, Rebecca. Back when I was first trying to get into Fire Emblem 7, I read a couple tier lists, and there was one that said Rebecca was 5 stars, and I believed them, and I used Rebecca for every one of my runs. And she actually didn't do too bad, but then I realized that a lot of units in Fire Emblem 7 don't do too bad, but that doesn't mean they're good units. Rebecca's an archer, which immediately means she's bad. 2 range locked is terrible. She can't counter at 1 range. I still hold a little bias towards her over Will and Louise, just because I like that she has a skill and speed as her kind of focused growths, because they kind of mesh really well with the sniper crit bonus, but that's a little niche. Exactly something that I want to bank my run on, especially with these bases. Rebecca doesn't have good bases. She relies almost entirely on her growth, and I don't have the room to be babying people in an Iron Man run. So because of that, Rebecca will probably put in pot like the next 3 will be benched. Then we have Marcus. Marcus is like the better in Fire Emblem 7. I'm willing to say that. I think he's better than Pent. You get him Chapter 12 in Hector mode, Chapter 11 in Eliwood mode. So he's right there, right from the start. He has these really good... He is a Jagan. The good Jagans, he's one of... Well, all of Jagans are good Jagans, but he's one of the Oifis, which means that he isn't only useful during the early game, he has decent enough growths to be useful throughout the mid game and sometimes even to the late game. One suggestion that I make to people is you want to make Marcus your S rank. If you don't know, you want an S rank for every... If you don't know, you want an S rank user for every weapon type other than staffs, because there are legendary weapons that require an S rank in order to use them. I mean, of course, they're not required, but it's nice to have a good variety of them. And if you want to use the legendary axe, I always suggest that Marcus be your axe user, because, I mean, look at the other options here. You have Torquus and Bartre, and Hector doesn't count because he already has an Armods. Like, what are your other choices? There's Geats, and I think that those are the only units that have axes, just straight up. There's, like, other units that you can promote, and they have axes, and units that have their axes at a secondary rating, but Marcus can use axes right away, and you get him like from almost the first chapter. He already has a B rank. I like making him the designated axe user. Like I said, I did do a Cavalier run, and Marcus was by far the best unit. He obviously had lower stats than Sane and Kent at the final chapter, but he still had enough stats to double and enough stats to do a lot of damage to people. So yeah, he's going to be very useful, especially for an Iron Man run. He's going to make a lot of things easier. I remember the good old days back when people thought Jagans were terrible because they stole XP, quote unquote. It turns out that you'd rather give a Jagan a little bit of XP that would have gone on your Lord than losing. And Jagans really make a lot of things easier for you. Especially early, I'll probably be using Marcus a lot in like 2 chapters in order to recruit Priscilla. And I actually think that's all the characters. One more thing. Oops. Wrong menu. There's a comment in my previous video suggesting that I get to window color 3. So, window color 3. That's all for the unit analysis and the map analysis. The video's already kind of getting a little long, so I will do the gameplay next video. Stick around.